Alleluia. Om Mani Padme. Om. Allah.
Welcome to Harmony and Diversity. Norm Currie is my name, and today we're speaking to Richard Leigh, who's the Managing Director of the Campfire Film Foundation. Thanks for coming in, Richard.
No.
On the website for Campfire Film Foundation, there's an introduction which states your purpose. And if you'll bear with me, I'll read it to you. In a world of increasing globalization, Campfire has a valuable contribution to make. As people of different belief systems come into contact, a common reaction to these differences is tribalism and fear. Tolerance can only be achieved through understanding both one's own beliefs and the beliefs of others. That's quite an inspirational statement. And what I'd like to explore in the first instance is your faith background, which sits behind it. What foundation does that sit on?
It's a big base, I think, and it's a base that's at times far beneath the surface, but it's always there, and it's the passion that drives me, and it's what was the inspiration at the very start back in 2006. When I had this moment of, yes, that's what I've got to do with my life. So I guess the simplest way of introducing that is to say that I'm a Christian. And I like to get that up front and kind of out of the way as quick as possible, because that can put people off or invite people in, but at least we've kind of got the ground covered. Yes. That's what it is. But there's a big discussion to be had about what does being a Christian mean, and what is that for me. So I don't know where you want to go, but perhaps you can ask.
From the start.
From the start.
From your first evolution of your Christianity in a family context, no doubt. How did it all pan out when you were a child?
Yeah, well, I grew up, I have one of the classic sort of Christian testimonies, if you like, and it would always started with, I grew up in a Christian home, Yes. And I did, and I think probably the biggest influence, obviously, is your parents, but there was also my sister, who was 5 years older, so I kind of had three parents in a way, and all of them had a faith that was very connected to the real world. It wasn't something I just talked about or, blabbed on about or mentioned on a Sunday. It was something that I could see they really believed in and worked through in their weeks as they were beyond church and that kind of thing. So it was there right from the start. I was also involved as a boy growing up through an organisation called the Boys Brigade. Nice. And that's it was one of the forerunners of the Scout movement, but it still today has a very Christian focus, whereas the Scouts sort of left that spiritual side of it. The Boys Brigade maintained that, and went along to camps and committed my life to Christ and all that sort of thing when I was about 7 or 8, or did that in a sort of a fairly public way, and going through my teens. There were, I got baptised, so I grew up in a Baptist church, and got baptised. I guess, my Christian journey has continued from there, and I would certainly not describe it as one that's static, but continues to evolve. And not that I have left that Christian faith, but it's been sort of attacked from so many angles that I've had to come beyond just thinking this is something that I grew up with that my parents gave me, yes. To this is my own, and this is what I believe at the core. But I'm still open to talking about it and really asking those deep questions when people come and throw them at me. So it's not a closed book at all, but it's something that continues to evolve.
Just going back to the Boys Brigade, what did that look like? How did you relate to that?
Look, I loved it. It was, you have your school, there was church things, there was friends in different circumstances, but Boys Brigade was quite a structured program, and a lot of it was sort of about achievement and, different levels of things that you could do, activities you can get involved with. But I liked they had sort of a four-pronged approach. I think it was, spiritual, social, educational and physical, I think were the four, something like that.
Yes.
And, to me that it helped me get a framework of the dimensions of life that are important to, to develop. And certainly the spiritual one was always there.
Mm. And how was that presented? How was the spiritual presented to you?
Look, in a fairly conventional way that you'd expect, like a Christian Sunday school sort of approach. There's Bible teaching and, basic Protestant faith explanation and discussions. So, yeah.
Mm. Mm. And did you make lifelong friends from that base?
Yeah, lifelong. You probably did actually. Yeah, I'm not sure who I still keep up with. But they're there, and they're still people that I'd call friends. Mm.
And the purpose of that question was just to see whether there was an ongoing influence, whether you felt that actually those camps laid a foundation which you continue to operate from.
Yeah, certainly. I probably. I think the leader of the Boys Brigade company that I was involved with at the time was always disappointed that I never came back in my 20s. I sort of moved up and became a leader in the organisation in my late teens, and but then I left. I had this sort of big year where I travelled and I did these sort of things, and I always said that I'd come back, but I never did. As I wanted to do all sorts of other things, but my heart is still sort of there. In fact, my own daughters go to Girls Brigade, but based on the idea that I still appreciate and value what they do.
Oh, okay. So the Boys Brigade, Girls Brigade, is that a Baptist thing? Or is it more broader than that?
No, it's ecumenical. It's right across different denominations. Yeah, but it tends to be in the more in the Protestant and Baptist kind of churches, I suppose. I don't know that there's any Catholic Baptist Catholic Boys Brigade organisations, but yeah.
Thanks, Richard. That ending was very good. We'll go to a break. Good. We'll be back. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. Norm Currie is my name, and I'm speaking with Richard Leigh, Managing Director of the Campfire Film Foundation. Richard, we were talking about the Boys Brigade. Now, in our earlier conversation, you mentioned that you reached a hiatus in your religious awareness. Would you mind telling us a bit about that?
A crisis point.
Yes.
A crisis point. Well, sometimes I think my life is a rolling crisis point, but that's another story. I suppose I was thinking about this leading up to that as probably worth mentioning. A lot of I had a really strong youth pastor at our church by the name of Simon Holt, and he was very encouraging about that really deep faith sort of foundation and really bringing that out. In lots of different ways related to our skills and all that sort of thing, and very encouraged sort of in my late teens to really deepen my faith, and got involved in coffee shops, evangelistic activities over school holidays and all that sort of thing, and so I was very much in a bubble of lots of young people excited about their faith, excited about sharing their faith with other people. And it was in that context where I think things, I wouldn't say they started to unravel, because I still have the major threads of those still there. I haven't thrown that away, but the big questions sort of came in fairly forceful ways. And I think You know, looking back, it seems almost trivial. It was about a relationship, but at the time, it was the biggest, most earth-shattering moment of my life. You know, I believed that God had said, "This is the person that I want you to marry." You know, I was convinced. I was absolutely this was a word from God, but apparently it wasn't. She didn't like me. You know? It was a moment of crisis. I think there was other things at the time. You know, I was starting uni, and there was lots of other people and discussions about, you know, from atheists and people of different faiths and all that sort of thing. But at that really personal level, I think that's where I kind of came unstuck. And when I travelled overseas, I think it was the end of that year. You know, I remember sitting on this bus. I had a one-way ticket to Papua New Guinea. I was going to travel overland all the way to England, just island land hopping all the way. And I remember catching the bus all the way to Cairns to catch the flight, and just almost tears rolling down my eyes, going, I don't know where I'm going, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know whether there is a God. I'm pretty sure there is, but what is my whole faith thing been about, and what is there any reality? Can I pray something and then get an answer that actually means something in the real world? You know, all of those really big things. So that was kind of the crisis. And my travel overseas through Southeast Asia, interestingly enough, the first 3 or 4 months was through Indonesia, very apart from Papua New Guinea, but then Indonesia was very, you know, it's an Islamic country, and I had lots of tracts from evangelical Muslims giving to me, asking, you know, was Jesus really God, and, you know, all this sort of, and I was receiving for the first time the kind of evangelical things that we had been giving out. I'm thinking, wow, how do I make sense of that? And, so that journey it would have been 1993, was a real sort of melting pot of all of the things that I'd grown up with and just sort of thrown to the wall. I didn't go to church every week then, you know, sort of the first time when I'd just said, okay, let's just throw myself out there and just see what lands. And, you know, I guess there's a whole story I could go on for a long time about what happened in that year and how I arrived. But I did ultimately end up back in a place where I realised that being an agnostic, which was, I guess, where I was heading, that to say anything is possible, perhaps God exists, I'm going to reserve my judgment until I can have all the facts in. Yes. That was kind of an intellectually good place to arrive at. But towards the end of my journey, I realised actually it wasn't a very satisfying place to be in, because everything involves faith. You know, you switch on a light bulb, switch on the light, it comes on, you're going to believe that it comes on. You know, you actually can't take steps forward in progress in my life. Well, this is the place that I arrived, without having basic understanding, basic beliefs and worldviews about how things hang together. It's just, not only is it not productive, it's not very helpful to move forward, you know, as a human spirit, as a human being. And I guess coming back to Australia, you know, getting involved in different programs that helped, you know, young out of home guys, and all the things I've done since then have reflected what I believe are the core important things about my Christian faith, and that is love and, you know, understanding others and listening and peace and thinking critically, you know, and let's not put that aside. These are the things that have been the journey going on from there, but it's certainly a faith that is a lot more richer and deeper and open to, you know, more interesting discussions in many ways about what it means to be a human, and a human that has the capacity to love and get along with other people.
That's a wonderful story. It's to have that capacity to evolve like that is very enriching. Was there any one overseas experience which sort of stands out more than any other that sort of maybe put a tick in the box?
Yeah. Look, there was a number of interesting experiences. I had some connection with missionaries in Papua New Guinea, so I stayed with them and sort of got a whole perspective. You know, a lot of my friends had done mission trips to see what missions were. Mine was completely unscripted and without any organisational backing. So I just went and landed in people's houses and said, "Can I stay and look what you do?" You know, and I actually really admired what they were trying to do, and still have a lot of respect for that. Then probably other experiences were, you know, at some churches in Singapore that I actually did drop into, some charismatic churches, and thought, I really liked the way they were getting excited about their faith, but something didn't kind of hang right with me about almost a sort of a showcase Christianity that measured performance and spiritual experience as a mark of success or whatever. I think probably the final one though was at a family I stayed with through some connections who had a lot of books, historical books about where the church had been over many years.
Yes.
And we'll probably have to wrap it there. But
yes.
but yeah, it was probably that last family where I really thought that was the sort of agnostic, moving on from that point and going, actually, I am a Christian.
Thank you, Richard. We'll be back to explore this further. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. Norm Currie is my name, and we're speaking with Richard Leigh. Richard, prior to the break, you were speaking about your experience of religions overseas. How has that influenced you in your relationship with sort of interfaith type activities?
I guess the interfaith connection has been a relatively recent one. Probably my overseas trip exposed me to a lot of other faiths. Most, significantly the Islamic faith, because Indonesia is so Islamic. And what struck me was the real cultural basis of their faith. So there was not a lot of really deep conversations I was able to have with people about what they really believed. It was more with backpackers that I was confronted by those questions. And maybe there's language barrier and that sort of thing, but they had a real perception about Christians, for example, because they'd seen them on TV, Christians in America, and they just thought Christians were just awful people, because of what they'd seen on TV or that sort of thing. So I guess the lesson from the trip was more about how a lot of people tend to view faith as a cultural thing. So the spiritual is so closely aligned with the cultural. And for me, that wasn't so much my experience, or not until I got back to Australia did I see how much culture there was around my own spirituality. So that was probably a bit of groundwork to an interfaith understanding or awareness. But my sort of entree into the interfaith scene was really not until about 2006, when I met a guy by the name of Sandy Kuripides, who you might have interviewed or at least met, who asked me to come along and to film the Interfaith Festival down at the Mornington Peninsula Interfaith Festival back in 2007, I think it was, and that was a fascinating experience. I had friends that were Buddhists and atheists and Muslims, that sort of thing, but I'd never seen them all come together in one place. And that was kind of a little bit daunting and a little bit unusual, to say the least, when I first saw it.
And what did that say to you when you saw that happening?
I guess, look, it was fascinating. I wouldn't quite go to say that it was inspiring, because there was some aspects of it that I thought, I'm not sure how this really works. I'm not sure that it's comfortable for everyone.
Yes.
But to me, that's also part of the secret of it. I don't think anyone is entirely comfortable in an interfaith setting, unless you're a, whatever labels you want to use, pantheist, or where you see everyone is just got to agree on everything. I think for everyone though, there is this basic kind of I wonder what they really think, or I wonder what they're not saying, or that sort of thing. But to me, that is part of the secret of the success of interfaith, in that you should be able to get together and you should be prepared that, okay, we want to be peaceable, we're peace-loving people, but there's going to be moments where we're not going to agree. How are we going to get over that, and how are we going to deal with that? And I think that's where I really get excited about what interfaith does.
Yes, your observations are very cogent indeed. and that, in my experience, is the same. How did it mould your Christian perspective after this 2006? Has there been a change since then?
Possibly. I'd like to go back to another step, because it's and it's more about how Campfire came about, I think. And there's an experience that really arrived at kind of a second crisis and led to a more interfaith understanding of spirituality in the world. I went to film school in 2007 at the College of the Arts, and one of the things that we talked about a lot at film school was, different worldviews. It was documentary filmmaking, so we're often exposed to films from all sorts of different viewpoints. One of the recurring themes was how bad Christians were, and how the kind of terrible things that Christians had done, either in other cultures or around the world in different times through history. And going in there, I felt a bit affronted at all of this, and my back was up. And so my major film for the year was going, I'm going to find someone else to pick on. I felt a bit picked on. and I was introduced to this Jewish woman through a friend who was into something called synchronicity high-tech meditation. And I thought, this is just out there. This is off the wall. I got it. And the more I, told this story, the more I thought, this woman is just kooky, And it was through the making of that documentary that I actually reached a moment of my own where I realised what I was doing. I was actually creating a work of art. I was creating a documentary, a representation of reality about a person that, at its core, was really trying to cut someone down and make them look like an idiot. And I thought, I can't do that. I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to be loving of people and understanding and tolerant and wanting, I've got to do something different. And that was really the spark of, Campfire and people coming together. We should be using art to build people up and to come together and talk and explore, rather than to tear people down. And that was what led me on the journey to Campfire.
Right. And it's a very, very interesting basis for it. So your Christianity today is one which is open-minded enough to allow that to happen. And your overseas experience was a key part in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's very very inspirational. Richard, what we'll do, if we may, because Campfire is obviously a big topic, would you be available to be interviewed in relation to that next week?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thanks for watching Harmony and Diversity. We've been speaking with Richard Leigh from the Campfire Film Foundation, and we'll continue the interview next week to explore further into that very interesting organisation. Take care.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allahu